If you spent any time online recently, you've probably heard the term decentering men being thrown around. And when women talk about decentering men, it makes people feel some type of way. People start to assume things like, oh, so you hate men, or you're going to die alone with your cats, or you'll never be happy, or my favorite, this is just feminism gone too far. But the truth is, decentering men isn't about hating anyone. It's actually about unpacking the social conditioning that women have grown up with that tells us that we need a man and that we must have a romantic relationship to validate ourself and our sense of self-worth. A lot of women today were raised to believe that we need to be chosen by a man in order to prove that we are desirable. And so, in my opinion, the decentering men movement is really women pushing back against that social conditioning and wanting to feel whole and happy just on their own without needing to go and find a romantic relationship in order to fill some sort of void that they may or may not even have in their life. But the idea seems to really upset people because it challenges a lot of fundamental beliefs upon which our society is built. So today I want to talk a little bit about my perspective on decentering men, what I think it means, what some of the reactions are, and also where I think we could go next with this movement. But first, if you're new here, my name is Tanya and I'm a family lawyer and mediator. And on this channel, I like to discuss all things related to relationships, from dating to divorce. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, please make sure you're subscribed. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. First, let's talk about what decentering men actually means. In a nutshell, decentering men really is exactly what it sounds like. It means not centering men's opinions, their needs, or their validation in your life, and that you don't make decisions based on what a man or men as a collective might think about you. It does not mean that you necessarily stop dating men, that you hate men, that you don't like men, and that you don't want men in your life. In fact, a lot of creators that I follow that talk about decentering men are women who are married. Some of them are mothers, myself included. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and yet I talk about decentering men, not because I hate men. In fact, I love men, maybe not all men, but as a collective, I don't have a problem with them. And I have many men in my life that I love and I'm close to, but I still believe that women decentering men is a valuable tool in their development as whole individual people. And I would say that it would work the other way around, but I already believe that men are very good at decentering women. I don't think we need to tell them that, because just like women have been conditioned to believe that we need to chase a romantic relationship and that getting married and becoming a mother are sort of the highest goals that we could potentially achieve in our life, men are not given that same conditioning. In fact, they're conditioned to believe that they will be able to get married and they will be able to find a woman very easily, because women in general were taught to believe that we need those relationships with men. We need romantic relationships. So for men, it was very easy to find women who wanted romantic relationships, at least up until very recently. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't need to tell men to decenter women and to center themselves. They've already been conditioned to do that. In fact, a lot of the discourse around decentering men is really women saying we should just behave the way that men already behave. And it's not said as a criticism to men, it's actually said as a they seem to be better at this than we are, and maybe we could learn a thing or two from them. And that's why this is a gendered issue, not because I think men need to center women, because I think that they're already centering themselves very well. And to prove that point, think about when we talk about a woman being good wife material or good girlfriend material, it's used often as a positive thing, a compliment, if you will, but it never works the other way around. If you tell a man that he's good husband material, I don't think he's going to take that as a compliment. And that, I think, in a nutshell, tells you everything that you need to know. Because men are already conditioned to strive for other goals, to become successful, to have a career, to engage in hobbies, and to do things that promote their own personal well-being. And women are often taught to do the opposite, to put everybody else's needs ahead of our own, to strive to become the co-star in a man's movie, in a man's story. We are raised to be a supporting act. And I've talked a little bit about this in other videos, but it's what we are conditioned to do. If we want to be good wives, we need to look after our husband's needs. And then subsequently, we also need to look after our children's needs if we want to be good mothers. And where does that leave the women in the story? It leaves them putting everybody else's needs above her own, and it leaves her sacrificing everything for the benefit of the family. And while I can understand why there is some benefit to that for everybody else, for the women in question, it often comes at their personal expense and at the expense of their own well-being. And that's pushing too far. And women are pushing back and saying, no more. We're tired of being the supporting act. We're tired of always having to sacrifice for other people who are never willing to sacrifice for us. And that is really what decentering men is about. It is about women reclaiming the power to put themselves first. They're saying collectively, I'm going to build my life around me and what I want and what I need, whether or not I am ever chosen. Because rather than chasing being chosen by someone else, they are choosing to choose themselves. So why does this idea upset people, and why does it seem to cause such a strong reaction? Well, the first and most obvious thing is that our entire society has been built around the idea of the nuclear family. And again, as I mentioned, the nuclear family really relies upon women sacrificing themselves in order to make that work. And often relationships won't work if at least one person is not willing to put the other person's needs first some of the time. And I think what concerns and scares people is the fact that if women really start putting themselves first and they start decentering men and decentering romantic relationships in general, that will be sort of the final blow, or the final nail in the coffin, if you will, for the nuclear family. And again, if that underpins so much of our society, then it will really require us to rethink a lot of the systems that we have in place. You already can see the effects of that when you see plummeting birth rates around the world and the discourse around that. The concern is already that if women choose themselves, then they're not choosing to be wives, they're not choosing to be mothers, and where does that leave society in general? And while I understand that in theory, I don't believe that it is correct for us to have a society that relies on the subjugation of one group of people for the benefit of everybody else. And women are collectively saying that they are tired of having to sacrifice themselves on the altar of motherhood, so to speak, or even just in general for the benefit of other people or one other person. And that's often what marriage can feel like for some women. And specifically from men's perspective, it can often feel like a personal attack or a rejection because it flies in the face of what they were essentially conditioned to believe, that women are desperate for romantic relationships. They're desperate to get married, and men can use that to their benefit. When women are no longer centering the need for a romantic relationship in their life, it becomes a lot more difficult to manipulate them into compliance. Now it's no longer good enough for a man to come along and offer this seeming love and commitment. Women are wanting more. They're saying collectively, again, that if these men are not actually doing something of value, adding something of value to their life, or in some way they're not a part of what the woman herself is building, they're not going to add to her achieving her goals, or they don't have similar goals, then they're not interested. They're not interested in pursuing that relationship, and it becomes a lot harder, consequently, for men to find romantic relationships. And in some ways, both men and women were conditioned to still desire and center that idea of a romantic relationship. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people talk about how men are lonely and, men are not happy being single and all of that sort of discourse. It's kind of a little bit a reaction to what women are doing, which is to walk away from needing romantic relationships. So I can completely understand why men are triggered by this. But what's interesting for me is how many women are actually triggered by the discourse around decentering men. And in my opinion, I think that this touches on a sore point for them because, again, a lot of us were conditioned to believe that we need that romantic relation. We need to find the one, the soulmate to complete us, or we will never be happy. And I think for some women, seeing other women turn away from that conditioning, turn away from that messaging, reject it, and actually be really happy and be living their best lives now, it makes them question their own life choices. They start to think, what could I have done with my life if I wasn't so focused on chasing men, chasing their acceptance, their validation, their love and attention, pouring everything into other people, into their husbands, into their children, and potentially into society in general. And all of this really does threaten a system that relies on women being the likable, ever-giving caregivers, preoccupied with everybody else's needs and not her own. And that is why women who talk about decentering men are often labeled as man-hating, feminists who, just want to destroy society. But again, decentering men is not about hating men. In fact, any women online who are talking about how much they hate men are not truly decentering men because they're still focused on men. Hating men is still focusing on men. Truly decentering men, and the women who do embrace this philosophy, actually don't talk about men that much. Even the ones who are married, who are in relationships, who are dating, that is just one small part of their life. They are often talking about things like self-growth, self-love. They're talking about their hobbies, their interests, their business. In fact, some of the creators often surprise people when they say that they're married, because that is how little they talk about being a wife, and that is how little they center that as part of their identity. And that is truly what decentering men means. It's actually just about not worrying about men as a collective, about letting them do whatever they want, because it's not our task to fix them or save them or help them. They're fully grown adults and they can do as they please. Decentering men is really centering women, and in my opinion, the next natural step is centering community. Because in truth, as humans, we do crave connection with other people. The problem is that as a society, we have trained people to believe that that connection needs to come from a romantic relationship, when in reality, we evolved to live in tribes or extended family groups. Romantic relationships were really just about procreation, and they, may or may not have held importance within the community, but they were not the central and sole relationship for individuals, and they may not have even been the most important relationship. And that is why I think we should take this opportunity in this movement and start talking about how to build better and stronger communities and how to really rebuild the village, if you will, because I hear a lot of women talk about how they don't have a village and how that can be really isolating, particularly when they become mothers. And I know that I felt this way myself. And when you look at longevity studies, more important than romantic relationships, it's actually feeling like you have a community and that you have a sense of belonging within that community that impacts longevity. And the best thing about building good and strong communities is that it doesn't have to happen at your own personal expense. Community should really be mutually beneficial for everybody. And so while it is important that you are a good and giving member of your village, you also receive way more than you give. It actually becomes a reciprocal relationship instead of a one-way relationship, which is what many women have experienced in their romantic relationships. And I truly believe that we as humans are designed to actually feel good giving and helping other people as long as that is reciprocated. And as an aside, I do think that strong communities can include people of all genders and ages. It isn't only about women having community with other women, but I do believe that there has to be a place for that in our society. I do think that women really do need to have good community and strong community with other women, just like I think men need the same. And I think that we do need to create space for them to have healthy communities for men, but that's really for them to build. It's not for women to go and build communities for men. But yes, I'm all for men having community amongst themselves. So in summary, I personally am supportive of the movement of decentering men and think that it's really important and healthy healing part of a woman's journey, as long as it isn't focused on hating men and talking about all the ways that men are awful. Because the more you talk about men and how much you hate them and how horrible they are, the more you're still actually centering men in your mind, in your energy, in your discussions. Remember that where attention goes, energy flows. So if you want to reclaim your energy and truly decenter men, you have to kind of stop talking about them so much. Instead, you need to start focusing your attention on yourself, what you need, and what you want your life to look like, absent anybody else initially. If you remove the idea of a romantic relationship, what would your life look like? And how could you build an amazing, fulfilling life for yourself? Now, again, that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily want a romantic relationship or that you give up on that notion entirely. It just means that your life, your goals, and the things that you do for yourself have no bearing on whether or not you have a romantic relationship. You don't do these things for the purposes of getting a romantic relationship. You do these things for the purposes of fulfilling your own needs and your own desires. And romantic relationships may come and go, but you yourself can always still be a happy person regardless. And I think that's the place that you need to get to. And in truth, this probably will lead, ironically, to happier, healthier relationships, because happy, healthy relationships are built by happy, healthy people. And you can't be a happy, healthy person if you are highly codependent, insecure, you have low self-esteem, and you desperately need somebody else to validate you and tell you that you're good and you're desirable, etc. Like, that is not a healthy place to be mentally and emotionally, and that is never going to lead to a happy, healthy relationship. And as I said, on this journey of decentering men, decentering romantic relationships, and centering yourself in the story of your life, the next step, in my opinion, should be focusing on building community with other like-minded people. And there are a lot of ways to build community, and I could probably do a whole other video on that, so I won't talk about it in detail here. But in the meantime, I recommend you go have a look at Chelsea from The Financial Diet. She's recently done a series on this exact topic. So those videos were done in the lead up to a new book that she's written, which I believe has just been published now. I haven't read the book, but I believe it's about hosting and, again, about building community and returning to a time and a place where we spent time together at each other's houses or in community spaces. And again, she's done, I believe, at least 4, if not more, videos just on this topic. So I recommend going and watching that for a little bit of inspiration if you're feeling lost in terms of how do I even start building a community. And I'm going to leave you on this final note. Remember that your life should not be defined by who chooses you, but instead you should reclaim the power to choose to be whoever you want to be and to choose yourself. And so let me know what you guys think about decentering men. Have you come across it? Do you feel like you have embraced that in your life, or is that something that still makes you uncomfortable? Either way, I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, I recommend checking out one of these videos, and hopefully I will see you there. Bye for now.